Hi, I'm Angela with High Quality Organics, the largest wholesale supplier of organic ingredients. And this is a second part series in Composting 101. And here I show you exactly what you need to do to have a successful compost experience. So there are 4 things that you have to remember when composting. The first is a balance of carbon to nitrogen. You actually need about 3 parts carbon materials to 1 part nitrogen. Now don't worry, it's not complicated. Carbon, I want you to think of as brown stuff. So it's paper towels, Kleenex, toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls, or leaves, twigs, or wood chips. All of those brown things are carbon. And you need about 3 parts of that to 1 part of nitrogen. Nitrogen is all the green stuff. So it's the grass clippings or the food scraps. Most food scraps are nitrogen. So what I find usually is the most challenging for people that are starting compost is they have all food scraps, and so it's all nitrogen and not any carbon. And you'll know if you don't have a right balance because the compost will stink, and it's usually because of too much nitrogen. If it's really, really dry, that might be a sign that you have too much carbon. So then you just have to water it down. Okay, so about 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. That's the first thing. Now, another thing to keep in mind is oxygen is really important for the majority of composting programs out there. The only program it's not important for is bokashi, the Japanese style. But everything else, you need to have lots of oxygen going through that compost pile. So that's why these tumblers turn, so you can turn that compost and expose all those food particles to air. You know, it's really encouraged also to chop up all your food scraps really finely. I don't make time to do that, so you just know that you're going to have to wait a little longer for a big banana peel to break down versus little chopped up lettuce pieces or something like that. So anyway, but oxygen is important. That was the second thing. And of course the balance of carbon to nitrogen, that was the first thing. Now 2 more to go. So the third thing is moisture. If you have a good balance and you live in a temperate climate, you shouldn't have to worry about moisture. Basically what you're looking for is like a kitchen sponge where most of the water has been wrung out, but it's still nice and damp. That's what you're looking for. If it's really, really wet in there and it looks like you might be able to squeeze liquid out of the, or it looks kind of sloppy, like muddy, then you've got too much water in there and you need to add carbon. So you need to add the brown stuff. What I do when that happens is I shred up some newspaper and throw that in because the newspaper tends to decompose pretty nicely. If you live in a really dry climate like I do, you may have to add water to the compost. I had to do that when we started. Our compost was bone dry, nothing was happening. I'm like, I'm doing something wrong. I investigated it and sure enough, I just needed to add more moisture to it. So just watch that pile, and if it's not changing, if it's not breaking down, you know, look for these little signs. The last thing you want to pay attention to is temperature. Now, for the most part, you don't need to worry about the temperature. What you're looking for is you want to feel heat from the compost pile. When those microorganisms start working, just like when we start working out, they create heat. So you can expect to feel some heat coming from that compost pile. You just have to make sure it doesn't get above 140 degrees. So unless you live in a really, really, really hot area, usually you don't have to worry about it. I live out in the desert and I've never had a problem. So just look for that heat coming from the compost pile. It's a good sign. It means everything is working really nicely. So those are the 4 tips. I hope this was a really helpful video to you, and I hope it inspires you to start your own home composting program. It really is quite easy, especially if you have a slick little thing like this at home. If you don't live out in the country, these are really great. So I encourage you to look for them online. If you have questions or you have some tips from your own composting experience, I'd really encourage you to share it on our Facebook. We love to hear from our viewers. So let us know what you think. Thanks so much for watching, and happy Earth Day.